Rick Revel, Mr. History, brought to you in part by DIXIE Gun Works in Union City, Tennessee. Just as Christmas was inspired by the birth of Jesus Christ, Independence Day was inspired by the birth of a nation. While some historians consider Thanksgiving the first true American holiday, other historians cite the 4th of July. As a perpetual student of history, at this moment, I have more questions than I have answers. On today's episode of History Highway, we're going to look into the origin and explore the facts of Independence Day that takes place every year on the 4th of July.
One, two, three. We're gonna drive in every day, and somewhere along the way, there's a road sign with a story from the past. History is everywhere, and I'm gonna take you there. So buckle up tight, we're going there real fast. So take a ride down the history highway. We're headed back to the days of old. So take a ride down the history highway. I got the pedal to the metal and I'm letting this shit roll.
In order to tell the complete story of Independence Day, we have to start where it all began. On April 19th of 1775, British troops were dispatched to Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts in search of colonial military supplies, and they wanted to destroy them. Tensions over unfair taxation had been growing for several years between the colonists and England, so when British soldiers began to flex their muscles, they were met with resistance. Local Minutemen dashed from their farms to fill the ranks of the colonial militia. After the legendary shot heard round the world, the American Revolutionary War was underway. According to Dr. David Dean, the assistant professor of history at Grand Canyon University, the protest over taxation without representation soon grew into a list of 27 grievances that questioned England's administration over the colonists' affairs. Thomas Paine's pamphlet, Common Sense, published in January of 1776, convinced many that America should be given complete independence from Britain. During the gathering of the Second Continental Congress in June of '76, a committee was formed to draft a Declaration of Independence. The 5 members of the committee were John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Robert Livingston, Roger Sherman, and Thomas Jefferson. Most of the words of the document were penned by the hand of Jefferson. On July 2nd, with the exception of a few minor changes, the Continental Congress voted unanimously to adopt the draft prepared by Jefferson and the committee. Feeling that it would be the most memorable moment in American history, John Adams wrote these lines in a letter to his wife, Abigail, on the next day. I am apt to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival. It ought to be commemorated as a day of deliverance by solemn acts of devotion to God Almighty. It ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other, from this time forward forevermore. With such inspiring words from a founding father like Adams, why is July 4th celebrated and not the 2nd? Remember those minor changes I mentioned earlier? Once those changes were made, the Declaration of Independence was approved on July 4th. According to Dr. Dean, even though the document was approved, it was not officially signed by all the colonial leaders until August 2nd. But when it came time to celebrate, the 4th of July was chosen, and it became an annual event in 1777. In the year 1870, the United States Congress voted to make it a national holiday, which leads us to our next segment.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash. You know, we the people have something to cheer about. America's 200th birthday, the Bicentennial. To help celebrate, the American Freedom Train is coming your way, drawn by a giant steam locomotive. Aboard the train, you'll see an incredible collection of priceless artifacts and documents. The American Freedom Train comes only once. It's an experience you just can't miss, and don't let your kids miss it either. The Freedom Train is coming your way, and when it comes, get on board.
During 1976, America held a grand celebration, and it seemed like everybody got involved, including me, your host. To add a piece of irony to this story, in 1976, I went on the Bicentennial wagon train pilgrimage. I went all the way from Memphis, Tennessee to Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. When I wasn't riding a horse as an outrider, I was picking and grinning in some wagon, or at night I was singing around a campfire. On July 4th, we arrived at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, and I got a chance to walk over the hallowed ground that the Continental soldiers had camped on. I also had an opportunity to visit the stump that General Washington had turned into an altar. It was at that place where he had prayed for he and his soldiers that I received the inspiration to be involved in heritage preservation. It was because of my love of heritage preservation that I gained the honorary title Mr. History. So it's not so much about my knowledge, it's more about my passion for American history. While we're touching on the subject of irony, let's talk about where we're filming today. This is the Cavett Place. It was built in 1916 by Colonel O.C. Barton, who was a very successful businessman from Paris and Henry County. Believe it or not, during World War II, this very building became the headquarters for the United States Army during the Camp Tyson period, and this room contains some of the memorabilia of those who served there. After World War II, Cavett Place became the Henry County Health Department, and as a little boy, about 5 years of age, I ran up and down these various steps. This is where I got my first shots before I went into the first grade. Eventually, Cavett Place became the home of the Paris and Henry County Heritage Center. And it was in this very room a few years ago that I filmed a music video called These Colors Don't Run, and I'd like to share it with you now.
Watch, they're almost at the top. Rising steadily like a tide. I could see men silhouetted against the sky. I could see the flags. I could see the flags, old man. I could see the flags! Waving like freedom!
Washington walked into a little room, and there a young lady stood. She had sewn him a new flag. It looked better than he thought it would. And those stars and stripes have been flying ever since that glorious day. No matter what evil comes, we've got to let our banner wave. These colors don't run, never have, never will. They followed old Teddy up San Juan Hill. No matter what comes, keep flying them still. These colors don't run, never have, never will. She stormed the shores of Iwo Jima. She reigns o'er the desert sand. She's a mighty symbol of freedom. The world depends on to make a stand. So we must not ever waver. We gotta stand up to tyranny. The destination of America, oh, it's up to you and me. These colors don't run, never have, never will. They followed old Teddy up San Juan Hill. No matter what comes, keep flying them still. These colors don't run, never have, never will. To God be the glory, may old glory ever fly. For the cause of liberty, be willing to die. These colors don't run, never have, never will. They followed old Teddy up San Juan Hill. No matter what comes, keep flying them still. These colors don't run, never have, never will. No matter what comes, keep flying them still. These colors don't run, never have, never will. These colors don't run, never have, never will.
This year, while you're cooking outside on the grill, I hope you have a better understanding of why there's a 4th of July holiday. Happy Independence Day, everyone.
My crew keeps me on the road from episode to episode, 'cause they all know I got a million stories to tell. I'm no dinosaur, it's cool to explore what makes a country great and put the crack in the Liberty Bell. So take a ride down the history highway. We're headed back to the days of old. So take a ride down the history highway. I got the pedal to the metal and I'm letting this Chevy roll. I got the pedal to the metal and I'm letting this Chevy
To support Rick Revel's mission to preserve American history, go to the Mr. History YouTube page and click on the Patreon button in the upper right corner of the page. Thank you in advance for your contribution.